ethnic influences in reference to consumer diversity. We're going to focus on three particular ethnic groups. One is the Hispanic group, one is the African American group, and the third group is the Asian American group. And each group is very distinct and has a lot of differences that make it viable to actually segment offers based upon this. And some of the slides that are in this chapter highlight some of the differences in terms of use of technology. So for example, Asian Americans overall tend to be much more technology savvy than the other types of ethnic groups, including I guess the traditional white group in America. So they tend to over-index on adopting the latest technology, using that technology, incorporating it into their lives much more so than a lot of the other different groups. In terms of multicultural marketing, one of the terms that's used in this particular chapter is the degree of ethnic identification. And what that simply means is if we go to, or the intensity of ethnic identification, is you can look at this in terms of what generation is this particular target customer that we're trying to interact with. And if you think about first generation immigrants who come into a new culture, they tend to intensely identify with the culture, the country from which they came. So first generation, if we think of Hispanics, for example, they would tend to use Spanish as their first and primary language, and English, or learning English, as their second. And their behaviors would reflect a lot of the traditional behaviors that are reflected in the country from which they came. Interestingly, the second generation of immigrants tend to be much more accultured, or want to identify with the culture in which they're embedded, for in this example, the United States. So they may actually shun some of their cultural heritage because they so anxiously want to adapt and fit in and, quote, be an American. So even though they may know Spanish, they may fundamentally want to only speak English. And to adopt those cultural practices within the country in which they were born. Interestingly, the third generation, which would be the children of the parents who were actually born in the United States, tend to look back and they look at their grandparents and they actually want to understand their previous heritage. So they tend to be a little bit more blended between the two. But kind of understanding how an individual and how their degree of identification with their ethnicity plays into how they see themselves and how they want to interact in the world can be absolutely critical in making sure that you're understanding what's important to them, specifically in marketing communication. What language do they want to engage in? And also understanding their different values and beliefs that guide their principles and that guide their behavior.